Hey everyone, this is Amanda Eke, host of the Poet Speaks podcast. Welcome to season 5. I talk to poets from all over the world engaged in spoken word, slam poetry, and oral traditions. And we were named as one of Strategic Media Inc.'s top 5 podcasts by Black creators in February of 2022. Tune in weekly to listen to me and poets talk about performing, oral tradition, and most importantly, they tell me why they need to get their words out. And guess what? If you or your organization wants to be a guest or a sponsor of our podcast, let us know and message us on Instagram and Facebook at the Poet Speaks Podcast. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks Podcast. Now, our next guest is known for performing in Chuck Taylor All-Star shoes and being dubbed the Queen in Chucks. She's been a featured poet of Compton Ca Suicide Prevention and Awareness 5K run in 2016, S.W.A.A.M spoken word artist and music, the 2018 Pan-African Film Festival Spoken Word Fest, Soul Sundays, the Speak Easy, the Griot Cafe, Poets and Allies, Rapp Saloon, Smoke Screen, Lyrical Rhythms L.A, and the Power of Words Open Mic. Now in 2022, she released her debut CD, LaLa DeVille's G-Junk Poetry, a hybrid mix of poetry and rap with hard-hitting G-Funk type beats. Now everyone, please welcome to the Poet Speaks podcast, LaLa DeVille. LaLa, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, Amanda. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, I did say your name correctly, right? LaLa DeVille.
LaLa DeVille, that is it.
There we go. Now, tell me, is that your stage name or that is your real name?
DeVille is my government name. LaLa was actually a nickname that my niece gave to me some years ago, and I never really did anything with it. And then once I started doing poetry, I didn't want to go by my full government name, which is LaTanya. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go with LaLa. So LaLa DeVille, it became.
And you know what? LaLa DeVille, that rings off the tongue, though. It rolls so nicely off the tongue. I like it. I like it a lot. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Now, tell us a little bit. You are born and raised in Compton, California, now residing in Long Beach, correct?
That is correct.
Nice. Tell us a little bit. We had someone actually on the podcast, born, raised Compton, and she told us a little bit about the spoken word poetry scene out in Compton. And I think a lot of folks don't know there is such a lively scene of arts, poetry out there. From your personal experience, would you say the same?
Yeah, I definitely would. And it's also room for more growth in the poetry community within Compton. I would really like to see that and, if possible, be a part of that. But it is a thriving community within Compton and the poetry scene.
Absolutely. Growing up in Compton, tell us a little bit about that background in terms of, did poetry find you in Compton, or did you find poetry later when you moved? Was it in that city, that locale that you found spoken word and poetry?
Well, actually, growing up, I started rapping. So basically rap and poetry, I ended up learning that it was the same thing. So I started out rapping, I think, in probably 1984, 83, 84, when I first heard Run DMC. And at that time, when I made it to high school in the 10th grade, Dr. Dre was with a group called The Wrecking Crew. And they actually did the DJing at our homecoming game, homecoming dance. So I walked up to him. I'm like, hey, my name is, at that time I went by the name Lotta D. So I told him who I was. I told him that I rapped, and, we hooked up. And at that time he was doing a radio show where he would mix the 5 o'clock traffic jam on K-Day. So he had me to do a little intro on there. And after that, I stayed in the hip hop world probably till 1994. And then I kind of backed out so I could work on raising my kids and working a 9-to-5.
Yo, hold up. You got to rewind. You casually just said, I met up with Dr. Dre at my high school dance because he was DJ. That is it. That's insane. Whoa. So that I mean, that's that's one of those things I'm sure you look back on now, you're like, yeah, that was quite an opportunity that opened up some things. Like how was that? I mean, like you look back on, like, do you look back on that, like the gravity of that moment? I met Dr. Dre when he was in the Wrecking Crew performing at my local school dance.
Yeah, sometimes when I see Dre on TV, just like with the Super Bowl last year when I saw the performance, I got to thinking like, man, I knew him when he was just starting out, and I wonder if he remembers me, which he probably doesn't. But it's very exciting to be able to say that I did know him in the very, very early beginning of his career. So it's very exciting to be able to let people know that.
No, absolutely. I'm more than sure. It is so kind of like you said, you had kind of so you became rapping. That's kind of where you began your career at. Where was it in the 1980s rapping? What was that like? I mean, compared to now, you know what I mean? What was the scene like, and like how could that even compare to the rapping today?
It was really different because back in those days, everybody was hungry. So everyone was really trying to sharpen their skills because everybody wanted a record deal. And the only way that you were able to get that, you had to make sure that your lyrics were dope, your production was cool, and then also it always depended upon who you knew as well. So nowadays, where it's different is anyone would be able to put their own CD together, market it, because you have all the streaming services now, and you have all these different social media platforms, so you can get your promotion there and you get your fan base up. And even though it's difficult to do that, I don't want anyone to think that, oh, you just get up there and you do it and it's easy. It's very difficult, but at least nowadays you're able to reach a broader audience than it was back in the day for us. And you have to remember too, rap was new. So a lot of people really didn't take rap serious. So us as artists, we really had to demonstrate that we knew what we were talking about and we were good at what we did. So it is a big difference between then and now.
Yeah. And it's like you kind of think about now, I mean, the internet has just completely changed the game. I mean, like it's like virality, you can talk to someone, a producer in Germany, all like from your home in like California, New York, or whatever, wherever you're living at. So yeah, no, absolutely proving, trying to get that record deal. And, people are more independent these days. I mean, it's very possible. Yeah. So I could see that things back then probably did look much different. Now tell us, kind of going from rap, how did you kind of form your way into a spoken word poet?
I always enjoyed poetry. And I know when HBO had the the Deaf Poetry Jam, I started watching that, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of dope because I had never heard of spoken word before. And even though I was very familiar with Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets and the Watts Prophets, I really wasn't. I really wasn't aware that it was considered spoken word. So I always kind of gravitated toward that. And then back in 2016, I started going to some of the poetry events that were around locally in Hollywood, Santa Monica, Inglewood. And I was watching this one poet named Queen Sheba, and she was doing this poem called the Period Poem. So I'm listening to it was a dope poem. And then I start thinking about the things that I was journaling in my journal. And I'm like, you know what? I could do that. So I went home that night, started going through my journals and started turning those entries into poetry. And I was really going through a rough period at that time. I was in a very emotional and mental abusive marriage. So the writing kind of helped, and that was at the request of my therapist. So writing really became healing for me. And then by getting into the poetry community, it really kind of started a healing, started boosting my confidence up. So it just pretty much took off on its own from there.
Wow, man. Wow. Okay. Wow. So would you say it's like in a lot of ways, like you had, thank you so much for telling us that. Would you say that kind of coming out of that relationship and now the therapist telling you, write down what you're feeling, would you say in some ways that definitely saved your mental health and maybe even life in some way, writing poetry?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was a way to get those frustrations out, writing them down and knowing what I was feeling in that relationship. I was married to a narcissist. He was like the worst of the worst narcissists, and the writing allowed me to kind of create an alter ego, and kind of sort of that's how I ended up creating LaLa the Poet, because it was actually alter ego, because it was, a lot of anger that LaLa DeVille was displaying. So it was a way to not bottle it up inside, because that's exactly what I was doing. And had it not been for that, then, it's no telling. He passed away shortly after, but most likely, if I would not have been writing, it probably would have been me first before him. So it was a great healing tool.
My God, wow. No, that's a very powerful, I mean, like even I would say testimony. I mean, if you really think about that, yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know what? It's kind of going into this alter ego sense of things, that alter ego. So you're known for performing in Chuck Taylor All-Star shoes. You've been dubbed the Queen in Chucks. Tell us a little bit about what kind of gave you, how did that kind of, who gave you that moniker, the Queen in Chucks, and how did you kind of get that idea? I'm going to perform in, Chuck Taylor's.
Well, I had performed in my very first poetry slam, and one of my fellow poets, he told me, he said, when I first saw you on that stage, I was scared of you because you had this big afro looking like the Lion King, and your poetry was so angry, but it was dope. And you kind of thuggish. So I had made this joke. I said, yeah, maybe I'll perform in some Chuck Taylors. I'll be like Dub C. I'll get a pair of blue chucks and red chucks, and I have one red chuck on and one blue chuck. And we cracked up off of that. And he told me, he said, nah, don't do that. But I said, you know what? I'm going to try. Now, I didn't go with the one red and one blue chuck, but I did get a hold of a pair of black and white ones. And then I just started adding to my collection. And then for my birthday, I ended up getting, I think, 3 pairs of chucks. So I had a nice little collection going on. Mm-hmm. So everybody just kind of started knowing me by wearing these chucks. And I remember this one poet, her name was Pam Ward. I was Facebook friends with her, but I didn't know her personally. So we were at this event in Santa Monica, and she said, "You're that poet with the shoes, with the chucks." And I'm like, wow, okay. So I kind of deemed myself the queen of chucks, because that's basically what I'm known for. My at that time, the angry poems and the Chuck Taylor. So it was a name that I deemed myself. So
nice.
And it kind of took off.
So tell me, at what point now kind of are we, so you had kind of, are we at in terms of your poet career journey? At this point, when you started the kind of moniker, you started Queen of Chucks, you started wearing chucks. At that point, had you stopped rapping and switched full time to your art form now was spoken word poetry?
Yeah, I had stopped I stopped rapping, like in 94, and I didn't pick it up until another fellow poet, Kwamel, he discovered that I used to rap. So he told me, you know what, you really should incorporate that with your poetry. I'm like, no one's wanting to hear LaLa D. That is like 20 something years old. And my first feature that I had at S.W.A.A.M, I actually did one of my raps, and everybody really enjoyed it. I like going back looking at that video. It is on YouTube. And I'm really glad that I did that. So Kwame kind of pushed me out to start picking up the pen and writing raps as well as poetry. So I decided, you know what, I'll go ahead and do it. And I was a little hesitant at first because I was already, in my, 49, 50, 51 years old. And I'm like, I am, pretty up there in age. I don't know about being that old coming out and writing, and coming out rapping. And I do remember some years ago, I had met this young lady and she was a rapper. And I had told my husband, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to revive LaLa D's rap career. And and it was really just kind of a joke. And he told me, he said, don't nobody want to hear from no over 40 rapper. And that kind of knocked out the confidence a little bit. So that was also in the back of my mind of, anyone really gonna want to hear a over 50-year-old poet or rapper? So I was a little hesitant about that, but I am grateful that Kwame got me out of that space, and I was able to actually start writing raps again. It was a little rusty at first, but I'm like, you know what? If I can write poetry, I can write raps again. So it just pretty much he helped me spark that stick of dynamite that, I'm waiting for it to blow now. So
it's like, kind of looking back on that, how important do you think? Because I mean, so much in life, you have those detractors that are kind of like blah blah blah, whatever, kind of going against. But like you had mentioned, Kwame was that kind of light for you, that kind of pick things back up for you to be like, no, go do it. You know what I mean? That's what you love doing. Do it. How important do you think that support is? Just like, I think really as an artist that support is worth more than honestly money sometimes, because it can be really hard to sometimes pursue what you want, especially in the arts.
Right. It's very important to have a strong support system. It doesn't matter if it's one person or 100 people, long as you have that support and you have that person who is very honest with you and not going to tell you what you want to hear, but going to tell you what you need to hear. And that will give you the confidence to keep moving forward. And as far as it being better than money, definitely, because that will keep the juices flowing, the battery in your back. It helps the confidence, help builds the confidence if you're having issues with that. And that was one of my things there. So I am grateful that I do have a good support system. I am very blessed to have that.
Absolutely. So tell us, kind of, for you had kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what inspirations for your poetry do you draw from to write?
Personal experiences, things that I see going on, just like once the incident happened with George Floyd, I started writing pieces according to the Black Lives Matter and the police brutality. And then I have love poems that I was able to start writing once I had gotten into a very healthy relationship. And then the personal experiences that I had from previous relationships, my marriage. So I just kind of pull from a plethora of different things that will inspire me to write a piece. Even sometimes, just looking at the sunshine will motivate me to write a piece, and it actually did. And I might hear someone say a certain saying, and that will kind of spark motivation there. So I just draw inspiration from so many different places. It's kind of hard to just say that it comes from one place. It comes from many.
Absolutely. I think I'm so curious then, you've had performances. I mean, you've done a book tour in Chicago. I mean, you've had a plethora just of experiences, No, you're a feature poet for a suicide prevention awareness 5K run. S.W.A.A.M, obviously. 2018 Pan African Film Festival, Spoken Word Fest. Soul Sunday, Speak Easy. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on. I mean, to have those kind of opportunities really around the country for you, what does that mean when you kind of just look back at this expansive career you've had in terms of spoken word poetry? What does it mean to have been able to be in all these places and just share your art?
It's very, very humbling, and it's an exciting thing to know that when I think back on it, or even when I have someone such as yourself reading my bio, it amazes me that it when I think about where I came from right before I got into poetry and where I've gotten now is, it's unbelievable. It kind of feels like a dream to be able to say, I went to Chicago, or I performed here, or I did the Pan African Film Festival. It's just an exciting yet humbling experience. And it's really kind of hard to put a word to it, because it's like, wow, I don't believe I did all this. So it's just it's exciting, it's unbelievable. And like I said, it's humbling at the same time.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like I'm so curious, this question comes up for so many people that I ask, what does it feel like to receive these accolades? For you though, like, everyone says the word, it's humbling. Tell me, for you, what does that mean for you? It's humbling. What does that energy mean? I'm so curious. What does that energy mean when you say, it's humbling just looking at those things?
I basically, when I say humbling for me, is knowing where I've gotten to and how much further I can go, but still continue as I reach for the sky, continue to keep my feet on the ground. Don't get to the point to where you're cocky and you feel that, I'm the dopest poet and I'm this, I'm that. It's just I'm doing great things and I'm seeing the greatness within myself. But remember where you came from and where it all started. And just keep in mind that you started from the bottom and you reach into the top. Make sure that you remember that it's very easy to be knocked back down. So just keep a level head, and do what you need to do, and don't step on any toes trying to get to the top.
Yeah, word no. I think it's such a I'm sure there's also like an aspect of it of it's humbling, but it's also, can you ever really wrap your mind around it? Like you said, coming from where you're coming from to see where you are now, can you even fully sit down and like wrap your mind around, wow, I can't believe like my life has came to this. I mean, can you even fully wrap your mind around, wow, I can't believe this is what's happened,
Not at all. I'm still waiting to wake up. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, because poetry has brought so many blessings into my life. And it's like, okay, when am I gonna wake up? Let me keep pinching myself because this can't be real. So it's still hard to kind of wrap my mind around it.
I want to talk a little bit about the book tour that you had in Chicago. I'm so curious for you, kind of. Now, tell me, this was for your first book of poetry, the one in Chicago.
It was actually for my second book.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm having a brain fart. I can't even remember the name of the book. Oh my, 31 Days of Mood. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 31 Days of Mood. I'm curious, it's was that the first tour you've ever done for your work of a body of work?
Yes.
For you, what was that like? I mean, because I was looking as during doing my research, kind of getting more specific details about your career. I'm so curious. A tour in Chicago, it's a lot of poets, a lot of authors. That's their dream, to go on tour with their work, and not many people get that opportunity. For you doing that tour in Chicago, why Chicago? Was it important for you, that city specifically? Why was that chosen for you to do your first book tour in?
I was actually invited by a poet. His name is Hood Raised. He was featuring at S.W.A.A.M one evening, and I had performed this one particular this one particular piece. It was so angry till I kind of had to retire it. And he was like, Queen, that was a powerful piece, and I think you're dope. And anytime that you want to come to Chicago, just hit me up and let me know. And a couple of months later, I hit him up. I'm like, you know what? I think I want to come to Chicago. I have this book, and I want to get out and get my feet wet. So he reached out to some other poets and who were in Chicago, and they just really welcomed me with open arms. And I think we were there for 9 days, and 8 of those days, or no, 7 of those days, I had a feature in different parts of Chicago. And then on one day we went to see Eric B. and Rakim. We ended up getting blessed with a free pair of tickets. So that was really exciting. But by me making it to Chicago, that was all thanks to Hood Raised and actually Blaq Ice also. He embraced me as well. So they were really excited to have me down there, and I made so many friends within the poetry community in Chicago till it started kind of branching out in other states, and that's how I was able to do a feature in Las Vegas. So, because I met people who were a part of the poet community in Chicago, and then it just opened up some opportunities for me to get into other places. So now I'm working towards making my way to Atlanta to try to hook up with Georgia Me and maybe Queen Sheba, and kind of get my name out there as well too. I just got to try to find some downtime where I can actually take a week and get out there.
Absolutely. Man, that's amazing. It's literally just that one connection has opened up the door to a billion other connections. How important do you think that is in terms of just, keeping that in mind, as a poet specifically, keeping that in mind of just the connections that you make with people could lead to so many things.
Right. It's very important because, it's just like, especially nowadays with the cancel culture, you kind of step on the toes of the wrong person, and you can be canceled as a poet. No one wants to feature you, and it's just really good to, when you have great connections, to keep those connections. Now there's going to come a time where you will come across other poets to where maybe you bump heads, but as far as not remembering to humble yourself, and you start getting the big head, and you start really thinking that I am the god of poetry, and you start kind of taking a dump on other poets who have a platform, then word of mouth spreads fast. Hey, I can't work with her, she's difficult. Or if someone say, hey, have you ever worked with LaLa DeVille? Yeah, God, oh Lord, you don't want her, you don't want to have anything to do with her, she's difficult, she's this, she's that. So it is very important to maintain those healthy friendships and those connections with those who have a broader audience, or have other connections that can get you even further than where you are.
Yeah, no, that's definitely how a lot of the game is played, right?
Right. And I don't want to be canceled. I don't want to be canceled.
There we go. Yeah, no, very true. So, I'm curious about your 2022, you had the debut CD. So this include it was a LaLa DeVille's G Gunk. Tell me how I say that. LaLa DeVille's G Junk Poetry.
Oh, G Funk.
G Funk, excuse me. LaLa DeVille's G Funk Poetry. So you had a hybrid of poetry and rap with G Funk type beats.
Right.
I'm so curious. It's How did that come about? And it's till 2022 is when you released your first CD. What is you for you kind of what made you want to do a CD specifically of poetry and rap? And why finally since 2022 is when you decided to release it?
Well, the reason behind the hybrid CD, that was an idea that Kwame had given me to. He said, you ought to do something where you're having part rap and part poetry, a hybrid. So I kind of started working on it like in, I think 2019 and 2019, 2020 is when we started talking about it. And then I started going through my notebook and finding poetry that I felt would be CD worthy. And then I started writing some raps and ended up putting those together. And I started listening to different poets that had poetry to music. And I didn't want to go with the norm. I didn't want to have the melodic background or the jazz background or the soulful backgrounds. I just wanted to do something that kind of stood out. So I love West Coast gangster rap, always have, Ice Cube, DJ Quick. And I happened to discover a producer by the name of Able Beats that had beats that he was selling. And his tracks were just exactly what I was looking for. So some of them, he would deem them G-Funk type beats. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should do G-Funk poetry. So I went to make sure that, it didn't exist already. And, I kind of dug deep into it and went through Google and YouTube, and I didn't see anything titled that. So I went with it, and I wanted to have these beats to where people who don't normally listen to poetry, but they listen to rap, then they got these hardcore beats that they can, turn the bass up and cruise down the street. And then they can kind of get a whiff of the poetry and what I'm saying through there. And then I also have the rap for those who are into rap and want the beats. And then I have the poetry for those who like poetry. So it's just kind of touching bases with the younger crowd, the older crowd, the hip hop crowd, the poetry crowd. So just molding that and putting all of that into that one thing is basically what I was trying to do with that. So that's how G-Funk poetry came about.
That's what's up. I'm curious. It's kind of G-Funk type beats. For those that don't know, what necessarily does G-Funk sound like?
G-Funk is, if anyone is familiar with Dr. Dre, Warren G, Snoop Dogg, those are G-Funk beats. Actually, that was a type of rap that I believe Dr. Dre came up with that. And it was just basically a Long Beach thing, I believe, more than anything, because it was these smooth grooves with these dope lyrics, and some of the lyrics were melodic, and it was just something different that no one had heard. So I figured, you know what, let me kind of do a play off of that, being that I am hip hop, and I love Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and all the earlier work that they had. I still have all of that in rotation now. So just the G-Funk thing was Snoop. It was Snoop. It was Dre. It was Warren G. It was Nate Dogg. So that there is G-Funk.
Sure. No, absolutely. I'm curious, would you say you're one of the first people to do this on a CD, poetry rap with G-Funk type beats, a hybrid?
I don't think I'm the first person to ever do the rap and poetry hybrid, but I have not heard anyone do I like to say, a gangster type hybrid with poetry.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just didn't find it when I was trying to, when I was looking for it. So I'm pretty sure it does exist. And if it doesn't, then I hope that my project will spark that idea for other poets as well. Because it's not something that I'm trying to claim as my own. I don't want anyone to think that G-Funk poetry belongs solely to me. No, it was an idea, and it was a piece of creativity that I wanted to share with the world. And I want other people to be like, you know what, hey, I want to be part of this. I'm gonna do some G-Funk poetry too. Or even if they come with their own, like I think I've heard trap poetry, but never the G-Funk poetry. So if it's not out there, it soon will be. At
Absolutely.
least I hope.
No, that's super cool. Tell us, where can folks kind of check out that music, that CD? Is it streaming, your website? Where can folks check that out?
Well, I'm on all the streaming services, Spotify, iTunes. I know at one point I was having issues trying to get onto Pandora. I have to go back to see if they actually ended up putting it on there, but you definitely can go to iTunes, Shazam, and Spotify and just look up LaLa DeVille G-Funk Poetry. You could also purchase the downloadable files on my website, as well as purchase the physical copy at my website, MissLalaDeVille.com. And I got a little creative because I know I support a lot of artists and they have their CDs, and I purchased their CDs. And now I have no CD player, and a lot of people are going with either streaming, or they have the little flash drive that they can plug into their radio or their computers. So I ended up putting my album on the flash drive. So you can have a flash drive if you want the physical copy and don't have to worry about, God, I got a CD, but I would buy the CD, but I don't have a CD player. So I went that route.
Yeah.
So if, all my merch is on my website. So if you want to listen to the CD, you can do that on my website, or you can go on the streaming services. And even if you put in LaLa DeVille G-Funk Poetry on YouTube, they have the whole album on there as well.
Nice. Tell us, kind of, since you've done so much in your literary poetry, spoken word career, as well as rap career now. Tell us, for you, we touched on this earlier, how much spoken word poetry saved your life. What do you think what do you think people can really truly take away from spoken word poetry? It's an art form that so many people, I think, skip over. People have a stereotype of poetry in their minds, but for you, what do you think people can really take away from spoken word poetry?
They could take away that there are messages within those words that are not your traditional poetry. They can find healing in spoken word. They can find happiness. They can find someone who understands them and can relate to them. It's, many things. It just depends upon the person and the artist and the message that's out there. So it just is a variety of things that can be taken away from spoken word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For you, I have one final question for you. We ask this to every poet that graces the Poet Speaks podcast with their presence. LaLa, why do you need to get your words out?
Because I know there's someone out there thinking the same thing that I was thinking beforehand. Why am I hurting like this? Why is this happening to me? Feeling like I was the only person going through that. You know that you're not, but something feels like, just gives you that feeling that you are. And by spreading the word and letting people know what my experiences are through poetry, they're able to say, wow, you know what? I was going through the same thing. And I did have people who actually told me, I read your first book and, it gave me the strength to leave my abusive relationship. And, thank you for saying these words, because I really felt that I was going through that same thing and I just never knew how to express it. So just being able to say what I need to say to get out any frustration or happiness or joy or anything that I'm feeling, getting that out and being able to bless someone with those words that's the goal there. That's the goal for me.
Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So as we're wrapping up, please tell us, what is 2023 looking like for your poetry, your writing, and beyond? And again, if you could share those Instagram handles, that website, so folks can keep up to date with all your amazing work.
Okay. Right now for 2023, me and Kwamel, we are working on a project together. We are a duo where we're going to be doing kind of the same thing, a hybrid of rap and poetry. And our duo is called The Live Return. So we have been in the studio for almost 2 years, kind of taking our time with that. So I'm working on that, still writing, and hopefully maybe put together another book. But I don't really want to go with another poetry book. I really would like to, and I'm actually working on, I'm just, I have so many things going on. I'm trying to put together a book of short stories. So hopefully I'll be able to get back to working on that, because once the pandemic hit, for some odd reason, just the motivation, kind of died down. So hopefully I can get that back up. And anyone who's looking for me, you can find me on TikTok as Miss LaLa the Poet. I'm on Instagram as Miss LaLa DeVille, and website MissLaLaDeVille.com. And just, you put in LaLa DeVille, it's going to give you everything. I'm very Googleable. So yeah. It's nothing difficult to remember. It's like, okay, I can't remember her Instagram, LaLa DeVille, Facebook, LaLa DeVille the Poet. So long as you know LaLa DeVille, it can be found.
Perfect. All right. Well, good to know. Good to know. Everyone, Miss LaLa's work, all the links to her stuff down below will be, like I said, down below in the details, the section, the information section, whatever streaming platform that you're listening to this on. So all her links will be below. Miss LaLa, thank you so much for being a guest on the Poet Speaks podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I had a good time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We had a great time listening in. Everyone, go check out Poet Speaks podcast. Bye-bye, everyone.
Peace.